Good evening. Sorry for the late time start, but had some friends over for dinner and just getting onto this now. So we are live for day 25. Let's pray and get into it. Father, I just want to thank you so much for these proverbs and what we can learn. We're going into a new section of Proverbs today, and let us let us apply these to our lives. Let them be a lamp unto our feet as we travel through the the darkness of this world. And we just thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're in a new section. We've had the introduction. That was Proverbs chapter 1 to 9. Then chapter 10 until chapter 25, verse 17 is the Proverbs of Solomon. And then from chapter 22, verse 18 onwards to chapter 24, verse 22, we had the sayings of the wise. Then we had further sayings of the wise at the end of last chapter. And now we are in Proverbs of Solomon that are collected by Hezekiah. So we'll start reading in verse 1. These also are Proverbs of Solomon, which were the men of King Hezekiah of Judah copied. So King Hezekiah, he lived a couple of hundred years after Solomon, and he was a he was a wise king to begin with, but he made a very foolish mistake. He was told by the prophet that get your affairs in order because your time has come. You know, your days are up. So get your affairs in order. You're going to go to sleep, and like the sleep of death. And he said, no, I don't want to. I want to live more. I want to live longer. And so the prophet is on the way out of the room, and God says, go back and tell, like he rips his clothes and he mourns and he says, please let me live longer. And so the prophet goes back in. God tells him to go back in and say, well, because of your prayers, I'll give you another 15 years. And so he's going to get 15 years. And he says, well, tell me how I can be sure of this. And he says, well, look, okay, fine. The sun can either go forward or go backwards 15 degrees or whatever. And he says, well, it's no weird thing for it to go forward, so let it go back, the sundial. And so it does go back, and he's confirmed in it. Now, it's an interesting story, and people might look at it as a way of, the power of prayer and everything like that. And but so I'm just being told that YouTube isn't working. So let me just go and have a quick look here. Have a quick squiz. I can see that people are online on Facebook. Let me just check. Everything is working. Yeah, I can see people are online on Facebook, YouTube, with girded sword. Okay, videos, live. It says I'm live, so it does say I'm live. Let me just say that I am. It says I am. It shows that it's working for me. Shows working for me. Let me just have a look. Yep. It's all good. All working on my end. So I hope they can get on. Okay, great. Good to see you're here with us. I'll bring up the chat in case anyone says. So yes, Hezekiah, he has his meltdown, says, please change your mind, God. God changes his mind, but if you have a look at it, you've got to ask the question, were those extra 15 years that Hezekiah had, were they good for him and good for the world, or were they bad for him? It's a very cautionary tale because King Hezekiah, up until that stage, was like this righteous, pious man. And God was doing him a solid by saying, look, your time's up. It's, like you've got to, it's time to go to rest. and he says, "No, I don't want that to happen." So he's initially, like, we might see it as this is him answering prayer, God, God answering prayer and him praying, but it wasn't a prayer of faith. It was a prayer of he was rejecting God's plan for him. God had a plan, and when he rejected that plan, calamity came. It was actually not a good thing for the kingdom. In the years after that, that was when Hezekiah had a son known as Manasseh. And Manasseh was one of the most evil kings until he repented many, many years down the track. Manasseh reigned for about 55 years, I think, and he was wicked for most of that time. He was wicked for most of that time, up until long enough for his own son, Amos, to be influenced by his rebellion. And he would never have been born if Hezekiah had have just accepted God's plan. More than that, Hezekiah's later years are not filled with good deeds. They seem to be filled with, well, I mean, the main thing that we know from that time was he invited the Babylonians to come and look at the royal treasury and the temple valuables, and of course they took note, if we're going to ever conquer places, this is a place to get some riches. So it was not his later end is not what his early start was. So wisdom accepts God's plan. It doesn't try to challenge God's plan. I think Hezekiah is a cautionary tale. But these are proverbs that were copied down in the time of Hezekiah. So I love this one. This one, number 2, verse 2, which is the first of these. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it is the glory of a king to search out a matter. So there are things that are hidden in this world by God. I mean, even Jesus, when he was here, he spoke in parables so that people would have to seek out the meaning of those parables. And so it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, and it's the glory of kings, that's us, to search out the matter, to understand it, to seek to understand it. So whether it's parables, whether it's prophecy that's delivered in coded messages and symbols, whether it's the other things, like one of the well-known ones by this stage is the list of names between Adam and Noah, which if you take the meaning of the names, they tell a story. I mean, you can do it also with the list of names of the tribes in Revelation 7, which is a very unique order of those names. They tell a story. If you go and look at what each of the mothers declared at the time of the birth, it tells a story as well. So, it's the honor of God, like it's the glory of God to conceal a matter. It's the glory of a king to search out a matter. Verse 3, as the heaven is high and the earth is deep, so the hearts of kings are unsearchable. Hearts of kings are unsearchable. So it's stating the fact, this one is that the king's plans and decisions are beyond the comprehension of the common people. While the king would make many things clear to the people, there are other things that are above their heads. So, yeah, this is true of God as well. Like God, in Isaiah 55, as high as the heavens are above the earth, and so are my thoughts greater than your thoughts, and my ways than your ways. It says in Isaiah 55, and we've got a similar thing here, that kings are dealing with matters that are complex above the normal occurrences. Like they're dealing with things like politics and the economy and things like that. But if we're kings as well, do we fit in that? I think that we do. Because whereas most people, like anyone who's a believer is a king, automatically a king and a priest. But if you're not a believer, you're not dealing on the spiritual realm. You're not dealing on what's happening in the supernatural realm, because you don't think along those lines. You're just dealing with the physical. So the hearts of believers, is unsearchable to those who are not believers, and until they convert, they're not going to understand that. They might wander after it, wander after it, and just be like in awe, but until they actually make that conversion and they enter the spiritual realm themselves through prayer and communing with God and with angels, that's a very different thing. Verse 4, remove the dross from the silver, and material for the silversmith will emerge. Remove the wicked from before the king, and his throne will be established in righteousness. Oh, this is such a good analogy. So until the silver has had its impurities removed, it is not usable by the silversmith. And in the same way, until the wicked in the court of the king, until the people who are sabotaging the king are removed, then the throne will not be established in righteousness. That's a very clever analogy there. Verse 6, do not honor yourself before the king, and do not stand in the place of great men, for it is better for him to say to you, come up here, than to put you lower before a prince whom your eyes have seen. Okay, so this is saying, don't big note yourself. It's better for other people to sing your praises than for you to sing your own praises. And it's better for you to be promoted than to be demoted. Jesus tells a very similar parable where he says, don't seek the best seats at the table, because, if someone is of higher status of you than you comes in, then you will be moved lower, and that's not going to be a nice feeling. It's better for you to be to seat yourself at the most humble spot, and to be moved into an elevated position. I actually experienced this, like an example of this one time. I was at a funeral for a friend of mine, a Samoan pastor friend, and the Samoans do something very different. They have a seat where they, like in Samoan culture, in island culture, specifically Samoan, they consider pastors, ministers, to be on the same level as a chief. So at the head table, there were the elders of the community, the Samoan community, but they were pastors that were invited up there as well. And I did not know any of this. I had no idea, and so I just sought to sit at a random table. I ended up sitting with the mother of of my friend. So I ended up sitting at a table that had the mother of my friend. And when the pastors were being brought up there, I'm a new pastor. I didn't go through the normal ways of going through pastoral, pastoralship. And anyway, the mother and a few others, like there's no way I would have presumed to walk up and sit at that head table when they were calling on pastors to come up. But it was at the urging of the mother that someone came and actually got me and sat me at that table, which was extremely like, whoa, okay, wow, this is completely. It was it was not something I was expecting, but it was beautiful to be honored in that way because of my friend and what he'd meant to me. So, it was like they had this tradition where they go around, like it's the funeral of their son, and they go and give all of the pastors this envelope of money, and I was just like so weirded out. I just immediately took it and gave it, as soon as, well, not immediately, but as soon as there was a discreet moment, I took it and gave it to the wife of, to the widow, because I was like, I just came here. I didn't come here because I was wanting money. I had no idea. It was very weird. Some customs, really are really shocking when you get down to it in a way that was like, okay, well, she needs it more than I do as a pastor. So yeah, like don't seek the best place. Verse 8, do not go out hastily to litigation, or what will you do afterward when your neighbor puts you to shame? So it's kind of like one of those, well, okay, no, number 9 is a little bit different. So, basically, you want to do your research. You want to do your due diligence before you go to court. I've been a part of court cases before. I've been sued. I have been, I've been taken to court over traffic infringements as well. I generally win because I do my due diligence. I would never actually start a lawsuit unless I knew I could win. I knew it was a very high likelihood I would win. Basically, don't go hastily. Do your research first. Don't go to all this fuss and then be put to shame. Reputation is important. Verse 9. When you argue a case with your neighbor, do not reveal the secret of another person, lest the one who hears it put you to shame, and your infamy will never go away. You've got to have discretion. Don't throw someone else under the bus when you're arguing your case with a neighbor. So do not reveal the secret of another person. I'm guessing this is there's a note here. The concern is that in arguing with one person, a secret about another might be divulged, perhaps deliberately in an attempt to... Yeah, so that's exactly what I was thinking. So... don't try and weasel out of your own issue by bringing someone else into it, because not only will you have contention with the original person, but now you've got contention with another person, and you'll be hated even more by the community. So it's another one of those reputation proverbs with a twist there. Okay, verse 11, like apples of gold in settings of silver. Ooh, wow, I love it. Look, just close your eyes and picture that imagery, like apples of gold in settings of silver. Very glamorous look. So is a word skillfully spoken. So a word skillfully spoken. Wow, try and say that really quickly at the end of the day. So a word skillfully spoken is like an apple of gold in a setting of silver. Gold. So gold in the Bible, just from a symbolic point of view, gold tends to represent divinity. It's, like the gold in the sanctuary was in the places where God resided. Bronze represents humanity. So bronze was outside. Silver represents redemption. So divinity set in redemption is if you're taking this in the symbols that you have, which I think is really nice. I do believe that it is meant to be a picture that you imagine, but I was just thinking, let's see how that fits with the Bible symbolism. So you've got apples of gold in settings of silver. What it's saying is that it's not just valuable, but it looks really, really good. And so a word that's spoken skillfully is something that is pleasing to picture, pleasing to the ear, really, in this sense. And then there's another one here. We've got another one. Like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold, so is a wise reprover to the ear of the one who listens. So notice earring is associated with the ear anyway. An ornament of fine gold. So this one is also basically saying that a wise rebuke is is of lasting value. It lasts forever. These medals last forever, and you probably can think of proverbs you've heard, not just from here in the book of Proverbs, but things that you've heard over your course of your life that have lasted forever. Like they're still with you today. And so it's true. Words are of lasting value when they're persuasive and meaningful. Verse 13, like the cold of snow in the time of harvest, so is a faithful messenger to those who send him, for he refreshes the heart of his masters. So this one seems a little bit weird. So like the cold of snow in the time of harvest, snow at the time of harvest would be rare and probably unwelcome, it says. But I think that I understand what this is saying. So in the time of harvest, the cold of snow, it's an image of winter. And winter in Israel didn't just bring snow. Snow was only on the mountains. What it brought water. Okay, winter is a time when you would have rain. Our summers are wet as anything here in Australia. But over in Israel, in the ancient times, the wet months were from the end of autumn through to the beginning of spring, beginning of spring. That was the wet season, and so what it's saying is it's refreshing. It's refreshing to have a faithful messenger. It's refreshing to have cold of snow. Cold of snow does so. If it's cold, if it's snowing, it's also probably raining. And if it's snowing on the mountains, then that snow will melt and it'll flow down into the rivers. And so that's the image here. It's not really understood in, like, the note is not bringing that out, but I think that's what it's talking about. I love these simile proverbs here. There's a set of like 4 simile proverbs. Verse 14, like cloudy skies and a wind that produce like cloudy skies and wind that produce no rain, so is the one who boasts of a gift not given. Boasts of a gift not given. A gift of falsehood. That would mean there was so a gift that he's got boasting about having given a gift when he didn't. So that would be, I guess, Ananias and Sapphira come to mind. Ananias and Sapphira, they claimed that they were selling their property. Well, they had sold their property, but they were claiming they were giving all of their proceeds to the new church, and yet they didn't. And so they actually, they perished for this. That was a sin that was so egregious, especially in the formation of the early church, that God wanted to set an example that lying to God is not, it's not a safe thing to do. It's definitely not safe in the long run, and so they were made an example of, just like in Moses' day, people were made examples of for very, they were still serious rebellions, but they were to stop even more. Like if God had let it go, something worse would have happened. And so, like cloudy skies and wind that produce no wet rain. I mean, we've been through that just this week. They're not welcome. That's not something that is, it's not fruitful. It actually is destructive. And the person who boasts of a gift that they haven't actually given is of the same nature. Verse 15, through patience a ruler can be persuaded, and a soft tongue can break a bone. David, our drummer, he read this out at church today, and I really, really liked it. So through patience a ruler can be persuaded, and a soft tongue can break a bone. So patience is important because, and I guess this is I talked about Sosthenes today in my sermon, and Sosthenes was this synagogue ruler who hated Paul so much that he wanted to have him beaten and flogged and put in jail for preaching the gospel in Corinth. He was, because the Christians were meeting in the house next door to the church, to the synagogue. So the synagogue was here, and then next door to the synagogue was where the Christians were meeting. It was like this surreal, situation, and the Jews were just fed up. So Paul initially went to the synagogue to preach until he converted as many people as he could convert. Everyone else was like, we don't want to hear you anymore. He converted the ruler of the synagogue, the previous ruler, the chief of the synagogue, and then they went to another person's house that happened to be next door, and that's where the home church of Corinth began. And so after a year and a half of this, the Jews seize hold of Paul and take him to be judged by the magistrate, the civil magistrate, the proconsul, and they want him to be beaten. But as a result of the proconsul's tolerance, saying, I don't care, this is not a matter for me, what are you doing bringing this? The rest of the Greeks were just so appalled at the Jews for their, snitching on Paul for no reason, that they grabbed a hold of the leader of the synagogue, Sosthenes, and they beat him and flog him. And so he's a ruler of the synagogue, and we don't know what, I painted a picture of what may have happened. But all of a sudden, when Paul's writing the letter to the Corinthians, about 2 to 3 years later, Sosthenes is the co-author of that letter. And he's called our brother. So he's converted. And what seems to be the most likely thing is that The preaching of Paul didn't persuade Sosthenes, but after Sosthenes was beaten, I can imagine Paul, who himself had been a persecutor once and has been persecuted, reached down and extended the hand of fellowship and said, "Look, mate, it's okay. Let me go and let's come and let me fix this up." And so through Paul's patience, a ruler was persuaded by love, and a soft tongue can break a bone. That one's amazing. Like um, we think of things like a sledgehammer would break a bone and stuff like that, but a soft tongue, uh, the it, being persuaded to do something can actually break a bone, of course. But what it's saying is that a tongue is strong. You know, it's stronger than you might think because it can have ongoing effects. And think about the person who reached you with the gospel, who reached me with the gospel. I mean, look at the effect of that. And then the person who reached them with the gospel, that persuasion, that preaching, that has had a long lasting effect and has produced a lot of fruit. So the people you reach are going to be in the same way, the people you reach for the gospel. Verse 16, when you find honey, eat only what is sufficient for you, lest you become stuffed with it and vomit it up. I'll tell a story about salt, not honey. But Victor, it was when he was a lot younger than he is now. He was about 2 years old. We were moved in here, and we had, I've got one here. So we've got this, we use Herbamare. We've got this salt here, and we had the Herbamare up on the table, and he was at the age where he's climbing everything. And we're in the lounge room there, and we're watching out to the table, and we see him climb up, and we're just like, let's see what happens. Like he climbs up on the table, and he gets the salt, and he starts pouring it out onto the table, and he's licking it up. And we've told him many times, you don't eat salt. You can put some salt on your food, but you don't eat it. But he's loving it. He's just going crazy. He's eating it. And then all of a sudden he's like, "Mummy, I don't feel so good." And so Alina goes and grabs him and starts carrying him to the sink. He throws up on the tiles. He throws up in the sink. He throws up everywhere. And we let it happen because he needed to learn to listen to Mummy and Daddy. But a little of a good thing is great, but sometimes too much of a good thing is actually poisonous. Now, if you ask Victor what happens when you eat too much salt, to this day he still remembers. He says, "You throw up," and I say, "Where do you throw up?" "On the tiles in the sink." He remembers that day. So he learned his lesson. Where were we? Don't set foot too frequently in your neighbor's house, lest he become weary of you and hate you. So this one, don't overdo and take advantage of the friendships that are around you or the acquaintances that you have. Be careful and be mindful that, you can overdo, like in the same way as you can have too much, someone can have too much honey, someone can have too much of you, someone can have too much of me. That people have their lives that they're living, and people are genuinely try to be accommodating, but if you take advantage of it, their accommodation, they might still accommodate you, but they're going to hate you, they're going to despise you. They might, out of the niceness of societal norms and conventions, they might go, okay, fine, but they're going to be resenting you. So you want to be maintaining that sweetness, not turning that sweetness into sickness for other people. Okay, we've got another simile proverb here, verse 18. Like a club or a sword or a sharp arrow, so is the one who testifies against his neighbor as a false witness. Okay, so like a weapon. That called like a melee weapon, really. Arrow is a ranged weapon. So like a weapon, someone who testifies as a neighbor against his neighbor as a false witness. That's cool. Like a bad tooth or a foot out of joint. Ooh, you can feel those when you say that, can't you? So is confidence in an unfaithful person at a time of trouble. So what this is kind of saying is that a bad tooth or a sprained ankle is going to let you down. Like that's your body letting you down. And so will an unfaithful person do in a time of trouble. They're going to let you down. Very, very clever analogy, that one. Like one who takes off a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar poured on soda, so is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. Takes off a garment on a cold day. So the taking off of a garment on a cold day makes you cold. So, okay. Vinegar poured on soda. I just want to see what that one says here. So the reference is to sodium carbonate, natural in Egypt, which can be neutralized with vinegar. So singing songs to a heavy heart neutralizes it. Taking off a garment on a cold day is refreshing. Like it can be refreshing. It can be refreshing. Pouring vinegar on soda neutralizes the soda, and so like I think of David, who would sing songs to Saul, who was troubled by an evil spirit. So songs are great. I mean, I remember when I used to not be a Christian, and I used to listen to songs that would exacerbate the mood that I was in, usually a depressed mood. And then after I became a Christian, I learned the value of beautiful worship songs. Like they elevate you. They don't they? They elevate you to the courts of heaven, really. And so music is extremely powerful. Verse 21, if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. And if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap coals of fire on his head, and Yahweh will reward you. So what this is very similar also to what we were talking about with Sosthenes. The enemy, he styled himself as Paul's enemy, and yet Paul gave him food to drink, so to eat, and water to drink in his time of need. This idea of heaping coals on the head, this is picked up in Paul's writings, actually. So Paul actually does talk about he uses this imagery. I'm trying to remember which book it is. I think it might have been one of the prison letters, but I could be wrong there. And so Romans 12:20. So Romans. The image of burning coals represents pangs of conscience more readily affected by kindness than violence. Okay, so I guess the image of coals here is like coals from the altar of the sanctuary, maybe. And so you're heaping coals that are from the sanctuary, part of the sacrificial system, which is likened to the pangs of conscience that you feel. So Yahweh rewards you. Like this is, blessed are those who, you're blessed when you love your enemy, is what we see in the Sermon on the Mount. Verse 23, the north wind brings forth rain, and a gossiping tongue brings forth an angry look. Okay, so gossiping leads to anger. It does lead to strife. I see it all the time. You know what I've noticed at Border Church? It's a beautiful thing that I'm seeing. I'm seeing positive gossip, and I think that's the only type that is very good. I'm seeing people going around talking about people and what they love and appreciate about them, to their face and to others. Like, oh man, like I'll walk past the conversation and they're like, have you seen such and such and what they're doing? I'm like, listening to see, and they're like talking positive, and I'm like, how good is this? How good would it be if we as Christians did positive gossip? Go around and tell people the things that we love and appreciate about people around us. What do you think that would do? That would be transformative to society, which is used to focusing on the negative. You know good things about people around you. Why not go and tell other people those good things about the people that you have mutual acquaintance with? Why does it always have to be the negative? We can build people's reputation. We can, and it's effective in the church because maybe you don't have a certain gift to help a person on something, but you have built that, like they don't know the person who does, but you've built them up. Now they're going to trust that person when they meet them, and they'll have a higher regard for their word. Maybe you're not a teacher, so build up the teachers. Maybe you're not a prophet, build up the prophets. Maybe you're not a apostle, build up the apostles. Maybe you're not a healer, build up the healers. Build up the people in the church so that when someone meets the person you've spoken highly of, they're like, oh man, I've been waiting to meet you. And that's how it should be, not, oh, you got to avoid that person, or, oh, did you hear what this person did? Yeah, look, I mean, sometimes there is a necessity to deal with those things, and it should be to the person, if at all possible, but build up rather than tear down. That's our job. Verse 24, it is better to live on the corner of a housetop than in a house in the company with a quarrelsome spouse. I always like to put spouse. So it says wife, but it can apply both ways. And I talked about that the first time we saw this. And so, yes, this is basically a word for word repeat of an earlier proverb. In fact, yes, it's identical. It is identical with 21 verse 9. That was so. These are collections from the time of Hezekiah, and it seems that they've collected some that are already in the in the Proverbs of Solomon. Verse 25 says, "Like cold water to a weary person, so is good news from a distant land." So cold water to a weary person. I love my cold water. I know some people say don't drink cold water, but I love it with ice. I love as cold as you can get. It refreshes me. I tend to sweat a fair bit, and so when I am drinking cold water, it kind of really, it's better than air conditioning for me. It does a more effective job because it actually cools me down from the inside. And I love coming in like from mowing the grass or whatever, and just like grabbing a whole bunch of ice, putting it in my gigantic cup that you've seen me drink from, and just go to town on that. And so, good news from a distant land. My wife lives in Australia, but she's born in Armenia. All her family are in Armenia, and so when she hears good news from Armenia, it's just, I see that it's like she's just taken a big gulp out of that. And even though I'm from here in Australia, just hearing good news around the world, things that are happening, like the gospel being preached and lives being saved, I love hearing it. It's just so refreshing to see good news going forth. Verse 26, like a muddied spring and a polluted well, so is a righteous person who gives way before the wicked. Like a muddied spring and a polluted. Okay, so a righteous person who's giving way. What that means is moving. So losing his integrity. So falling down. It's like a muddied spring. So the righteous person prior to that was like a fresh spring. They were somewhere where you could drink from. They were like a well that wasn't polluted, that was a pure well. And so when they fall, when the righteous person falls, they become muddied. And you can see that in, like, the best modern example I can think of this is Ravi Zacharias. So Ravi Zacharias, an amazing apologist and preacher, and yet after he died, these things came out. And look, most of the world has concluded that the accusations against him are correct, that they are true. He's not around to answer to them, which is an unfortunate thing. His son and other family members insist that there is another side to the story, and I have read some of it, and some of it does appear to say, hey, there are questions here worth looking at. There was a lack of some transparency in the investigation into Ravi Zacharias. In fact, the family was omitted completely from the entire process, so appear not to have been allowed to speak into it. But let's just assume for a second that he is guilty. He was guilty of those things, which is, having paying for people who were masseuses that were, you can put your own imagination into that. So Ravi, his material is now basically worthless in the world. Like you can't. No one's got any demand for Ravi Zacharias videos and debates that he did, or any of his books. His books are basically worthless. No one wants to buy them, which is a real shame because he had some amazing books. And there was one book that was only meant to be published after his death that will probably never be published, sadly. And I'm really rotten about it because it's he had this series called Great Conversations, and he imagined if Jesus was having a conversation with Buddha or Jesus. So that one was called The Lotus and the Cross. Brilliant book that looks at the different. So there's Buddha and Jesus are on this boat going down a canal, and there's another person in the boat who's like the person who is listening to both sides of the discussion. And it's just interesting how he has created the ideological differences between Buddha and Jesus in this fictionalized story. He's got one with Krishna. He's got one with Hitler over Mein Kampf. He's got one with where Jesus is speaking to. So he's got all of these ones, but there was one that was never published in his life, and it was written apparently to be published after his death, which was called The Prophet and the Prince, The Prince and the Prophet, and it's about him having a conversation with Muhammad. And so obviously there was safety concerns about this. But it has never been, and probably will never be released, sadly, because it's one that would have been phenomenal to read, because his other books are just so amazing. So be careful about the way you live your life, because you might muddy all of the good that you've done. You might tarnish the otherwise amazing things. So be careful. Verse 27, it is not good to eat too much honey, nor is it honorable for people to seek their own glory. Okay, so we're kind of repeating the honey thing again. Nor is it honorable for people to seek their own glory. So that's also a bit of a repeat. Don't seek to lift yourself up. That's someone else's job. Lift other people up. And if you're lifting, like if everyone in the church is lifting other people up, someone's going to be lifting you up at some point. So lift other people up and let other people extol your virtues and your values. That's where glory comes from, and it's ultimately God who lifts everyone up through that. And here's our final one for the day for chapter 25. Like a city that is broken down and without a wall, so is the person who cannot control his temper. Oh, that's cool. So like the city is broken down, meaning that there's no defense. You've got no defense, and you we talk about people who are thin-skinned, people who they take offense at the slightest provocation. Now, sometimes that is because of long exposure to bullying or to different things. Like you become a fighter. Like the moment that someone hits you, you hit back. But that means that you've got nothing to protect you. You've got no walls built up, and so you can't control it. I used to be like that. I used to be extremely like that. I was bullied through most of primary school, and when I would get hit physically or verbally, I would hit back verbally. I wasn't really good at hitting back physically, but I would hit back verbally, and I'd hit back like 10 times as hard. Like whatever you called me, I'd call you I'd call you much worse. And it was not, I didn't control it. I literally, like, if I got hit, I'd be like, I'd be into fight mode. And I'd stand up to them and I'd be like, come on, come at me, whatever, I'd be in on it, like into it. And so, I couldn't control retaliating. Like, I would just retaliate. And so I didn't have walls built up. Now I have walls built up. You hit me, like really the only thing that triggers me more than anything is when I see people I love get hit. Like that's when I'll jump in, and I've got to even watch that. But if you hit me, I'm like whatever, so what? And so we've got to build up those walls for ourselves, especially. You don't want to be defending yourself. Defending others is, I think, much more noble, but defending yourself is it's not seen as being as highly virtuous. Let someone else do it. Let someone else do it, and let God do it. God says, "Vengeance is mine. So yeah, that's where we end today. I hope you guys have had a great Sabbath. I hope you have a great night. I hope your day tomorrow is fantastic. I'm looking forward to this final week. Today is the first day of our last 7 chapters of Proverbs, so we're on that final stretch. Join me tomorrow, hopefully not as late because I won't have had some friends over for dinner, but please join us for chapter 26. How many verses are there in 26? This was a short chapter today, and it's another short chapter, so we'll power through that easily. All right, Father, we just want to thank you so much for just these very vivid proverbs today, where we had I love these. I love metaphor and I love simile and I love being able to imagine different things and these were very clever. So Father, thank you for these thought provoking and heart touching proverbs that we can go through, and I just pray that they're of benefit to me and to those who watch this whenever they watch it, whether live or later. And thank you so much. Help us to have a good rest and to have a lot of blessings out of the last week of this journey together. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, thank you guys. See you tomorrow for chapter 26. Bye for now. And by the way, happy Australia Day for tomorrow. It's going to be a great one.